Let's watch a couple clips of Bernie Sanders with Jake Tapper discussing his grilling of a few of the potential Trump cabinet members so we can see what the party of the worker, as their voters like to pretend, has to say about some of the most crucial issues plaguing the working class.
Will you work with those of us who want to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage to take millions of Americans out of poverty?
Senator, I believe that the minimum wage is more of a statewide and regional issue.
So you don't think we should change the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour?
No, sir.
Senator, obviously you're not happy with that. Are there enough votes in the Senate, do you think, to raise the minimum wage?
I would hope so. Look, we have tens of millions of workers in this country who are trying to get by on 12, 14, 15 bucks an hour, and you can't do that. We have not raised the minimum wage, I think, since 2010. It is now $7.25 an hour. And that you have a nominee for Secretary of Treasury who does not believe that we should raise that minimum wage is entirely unacceptable. I mean, we need a government that starts looking out for working families and not just billionaires.
Remember, guys, party of the working class. That's exactly why they appointed a billionaire to Treasury that doesn't think that minimum wage for workers should be raised to meet productivity or the cost of living. And to fully put this into perspective for you, worker productivity is at an all-time high. We are working and producing at record levels. Corporate profits are at an all-time high because of this productivity increase we have seen from the workforce. Yet despite this, minimum wage has not increased. In fact, median wages in general have barely increased, especially compared to how much productivity has increased. Meanwhile, education, housing, cost of everything has increased like tenfold, right? But you know what has increased on top of that? The pay for the top 1% has over 100%. Stock buybacks are at record highs, which enrich stockholders, the top 1% as well. In recent years, all-time highs. When people talk about the establishment and elites, this is what it actually is, not the immigrants that MAGA wants you to hate and blame for it. It's these billionaires who want to use your labor to benefit themselves more and more, then come and cut their taxes on top of that and pull from your social programs to do so and add to the deficit. But hey, party of the working class, guys. Remember, they're definitely anti-elite.
We don't talk about this enough. And that is when you got three people on top who own more wealth than the bottom half of American society, 170 million people. You know what? That's oligarchy. When you have massive concentration of ownership in our economy, fewer and fewer corporations owning and controlling the economy, that's oligarchy. When you have more and more billionaires, whether it's Musk owning Twitter or Murdoch owning Fox, or other billionaires owning newspapers, that's oligarchy. And lastly, and most importantly, and I think Biden made this point, is we have just come through an election where you get one vote, I get one vote, but billionaires were able to spend many hundreds of millions of dollars to elect or defeat the candidates that they wanted. You add all of that up, massive concentration of ownership, massive income and wealth inequality, massive amounts of political power. You know what? You just can't go around saying, well, Russia and Putin, they're an oligarchy, but we're not. You know what? We are.
This is why we love Bernie. And to be clear, what he's speaking of here is the establishment. What he is speaking about is what the establishment actually is. I know MAGA has tried to take that word over. It stands to protect the interest of the elites, which aren't Democrats, by the way. Elites are billionaires. Elites are a class of people. Establishment is the machine to protect their interests over ours. They successfully have distracted from this, where more and more people were catching on with the popularity of Bernie Sanders in 2016 and the likes thereof by co-opting the language of the movement, but then pointing the finger at cultural elements instead of class elements to play on a lot of people's underlying either racism or racial paranoia that was very much so pertinent. Which is why you hear Trump using language like the establishment or the elites, but it's always in the context of Democrats, usually Jewish billionaires like George Soros, or things regarding immigrants or immigration. And MAGA does by extension of just regurgitating whatever Trump says, but when an actual elite or a tool of the actual establishment or the establishment itself is just in control of Republicans, they don't have an issue with it. think Elon Musk versus George Soros. I mean, they'll even argue that it's a good thing. Yet it's the driver of the income inequality we see today, which is the root of a lot of issues, which is a problem Republicans have. They don't like to talk about root causes, right? This income inequality leads to the less funding for schools because there's less property taxes to take to fund them. It leads to less education outcomes for all because there's less funding in the schools, higher crime rates because of more poverty. That's why there's less opportunity around for everyone. But they've successfully convinced their base, again, largely by playing on these racial paranoias, that it's not them doing it, even though, they're hoarding all the food over here. It's those immigrants that are also hungry. And by extension, the Democrats that are wanting to protect the immigrants. And then they'll in the same breath try to say the left is the one that makes everything about race, as they call every black person a DEI hire and say immigrants are taking their job. And there's not really a lot of logical consistency on that side.
Do you agree with President-elect Trump that climate change is a hoax?
I believe that climate change is real, as I told you. As far as President Trump goes, the context that I've heard him speak about it was with a criticism of policies that have been acted because of climate change, and I think that he's concerned about the economic costs of some policies where there's a debate and a difference of opinion between parties.
I would respectfully disagree with you. I think he has called it a hoax time and time and time again.
You are accurate. He has. Mr. Zeldin also told you it would be his job to, quote, lose sleep at night to make sure that we are making our air and our water cleaner, unquote. So what did you make of his testimony today?
Not anywhere near as strong as it has to be, given, and we throw around this term a lot, but it happens to be true. Take a look at what's happening in LA. What's the extreme weather disturbances, the droughts, the flooding, the warming of the ocean. This is a global crisis.
And again, this is one of the major issues with Republicans, if not the core reason they'll never be efficient, right? They love to talk about symptoms, mostly because it gives them something to complain about, but they don't really like talking about root causes. They will point the finger at California when it's burning, but they reject water infrastructure and climate change legislation regularly, right? They say, oh, well, the pumps were out of water, even though they weren't. But what they mean is that the pumps were out of pressure, right? Which was caused because they haven't been updated to meet the demands that climate change can cause these types of fires to have on them, largely because Republicans will block that legislation, largely because the head of their party, Donald Trump, says it's a hoax. Though, to be fair, 5 wildfires in any situation is going to do damage, but the reason, again, the core reason Republicans will always be ineffective, right? They will never act proactively and always reactively. It's the same reason why cops will never solve crime or eradicate crime, because they're just responding to issues. They're not trying to prevent them.